Wisconsin area, and I'm a pediatric speech therapist. So Ron and I just have known each other for a little while, and she asked me to just present tonight a little bit about AAC and TBIs. And then I'm just going to kind of present probably for like 20, 25, and then just make it an open forum, because I know some of you had sent questions, and I have some answers to those questions and some resources for those questions. But also, I know more questions kind of come up situationally. And so I figure sometimes open forum is way better with parents than anything else. So I'm going to share my screen. Just give me a second. All right. So can y'all hear me? Okay, as long as I can't see y'all anymore, so I have no idea. So I work for Tobii Dynavox. It's one of the leading AAC companies. I didn't do this mainly on Tobii Dynavox. I did it mostly on AAC in general, which is the augmentative communication. So I'm Kirsten White. I worked as an SLPA in a private practice, a pediatric clinic, a school for autism, just kind of a little bit about me. So AAC is a journey. Intervention is an ongoing and dynamic process because of the needs of the child following a TBI will vary over time depending on the stage of recovery, presence of cognitive behavioral changes, and communication needs in particular settings. Training of teachers, staff, and family members for the purpose of optimizing functional communication is also an essential part of an AAC intervention. I saw this earlier when I was making this presentation, and I thought this is perfect, because I think we all forget that just because we start here, or we start with this access method, that's not where we want to end up necessarily, or it might be where we end up, but we have no idea what it's going to look like, and every TBI is so different. And I think a lot of therapists forget that as well, so it's a good thing to have a whole team on it. I left a good chunk of time at the end for an open forum, like I said, so please feel free as we go to put questions in the chat, and then I can go back to the chat when I stop sharing this, and we can go through those questions. So what is augmentative and alternative communication? Let me bring up because it's hard when you're sharing a screen, so give me 1 second. Any method that helps a person with significant communication challenges communicate more effectively. So we want to be able to engage socially, provide a voice not spoken or talked for, and support learning speech and language, or relearning speech and language in a lot of situations. So what is AAC? AAC is any method of communication that is used in addition to or instead of natural speech. All people, even those who primarily when not use natural speech, use different forms of AAC every day. We use gestures, we use facial expressions. All of those help us emphasize our message. Texts and emails to communicate. Body language to show your interest or disinterest when engaging in conversation are all forms of AAC. It all goes together. So I know a big question a lot of times after a TBI and down the road from it becomes access methods. And I think this is where a lot of people get more interested in questions of how does my child use it? So touch device, which we call direct select, which I think most people kind of have a clue. A lot of times you see it on iPads, you see it on dedicated devices, somebody that can isolate that finger or thumb and really hit those buttons. And there's also some key guards if like your child drags their finger, if they're at that point, and it helps them get in the holes better. Scanning, which say your child has access of maybe just an elbow or their head a little bit, or maybe a thumb or a toe. You can put a switch, and this is just one example of a switch. There's all different types to allow them to access the device that way. And it is learning that scanning pattern And that really goes hand in hand with their speech therapist's ability to really teach it. There's also a joystick, very much like a mouse. I think you see that there. And sometimes that helps with that fine motor isn't available, but a little more gross motor to be able to select. Head mouse. I have a few kids on head mouses that their vision isn't quite good enough for an eye tracking device. So it's a dot that goes in the middle of their forehead, and they're able to select basically like you would on a regular hand mouse with their head, and then eye tracking. Um, Eye tracking has come really far in the last few years, and I have a few actual kiddos that couldn't use eye tracking for the last 10 years that are now able to because their CVI was so bad or their nystagmus was so bad that they weren't able to, and now they can, and they're actually really proficient on their devices. So I always say it's worth trying everything. Certain ones you can rule out pretty easily depending on what it is, but trying it is your best bet. And I know for me, and I know some of the other reps, some of the other companies, we all have a lot of the device, all the access methods to bring with our devices that we're able to try it with your kids. Some of our solutions are the devices. So you have the ability to touch on these devices here, the i110, an iPad, and then we have our eye gaze devices that allow you to do eye gaze and actually all your computer functions with your eyes. So it's not just communication. I have a few teenagers right now that have traumatic brain injuries, and yes, they can communicate, but they're also learning to use like their Facebook and their Instagram with their eyes again. So it's pretty cool how many different things you can do with the newer devices. um, so evolution of AAC during recovery. So knowing all TBIs are different and taking different paths of recovery, the use of AAC must be looked at individually for each child along the way. When starting out, the child may use an eye gaze device to select pre-programmed phrases, yes or no, and basic commands. Also to play some games to strengthen their eye muscles and learn that cause and effect of retraining their brains that my eyes are doing this and like this is leading to communication. From there, the same child 10 months later may use a combination of their hands and eyes to select, depending on fatigue and levels of dexterity. Then they might have some natural speech for words if that comes back at that time. The same child 3 years later may use a simple touch device to help those that are unfamiliar with their natural speech and understanding them. It's a continuum. So we don't know, looking at it right now, what it's going to look like 3 years from now. But the sooner you get the intervention now, you can progress towards that 3 years from now. Multimodal communication is also something major we look at. So many people who use an AAC device do not rely on a single method of communication. In fact, most people employ multimodal communication. They alternate among, sometimes combine several support strategies to maximize their communication effectiveness. For example, a person may choose to use a high-tech dynamic display during communicate with unfamiliar communication partners in public places, but they might at home use vocalizations to interact with family members. I had a gentleman the other day who he could do certain sounds with his mouth, and depending on which way he looked with his eyes, his mom knew exactly what he was saying, and then he typed everything out on his switch scanning device on his computer to actually tell me, because I didn't know what he was saying with his eyes. I had never met him before. So using it all together of what works best for your family and for your kid is usually the best option. Common thoughts and questions. A lot of the myths. I do have papers on a lot of these. I put a little bit of information in, but a lot of them are, is it going to prevent my child from speaking naturally? Will it delay my child's speech? If they have a CVI, they can't use an eye gaze. They need full head control and eye control to use eye gaze and must prove they know how to communicate before they get an AAC device. Um, so this is the first one for natural speech. So they work together. So the use of speech in AAC does not require you to pick one. They're used together. And I can send these handouts out for this research out. If anybody would like it, please ask me. I can send you all of them. We all use multiple forms of communication on a daily basis. We talk, point, wave, and use facial expressions and body language. We make decisions about what method to communicate of communication we use based on the environment or communication partner and the message. The individual who uses AAC is no different. AAC speech, pointing, gestures, facial expressions, and body language coexist as part of their multimodal communication, like we just talked about. So, just as we do, they need to make decisions about which mode of communication to use based on the environment, communication partner, and their message. So it doesn't take away from, it actually helps them to hear it too. So it's not just us being like, say this, say this. It's not us modeling it for them, then learning those spots of where they're either picking with their hand or their eyes or their switch. It says it for them and they can actually hear it. And it's the connections in the brain that are made with it. For the other one of, oh, your kid has to prove they know this and this before we can get an AAC device. I hear that a lot. I've had some schools tell me that, and it's kind of goes against all ethical pieces of it. So you're supposed to presume competence. So presuming competence is believing that an individual, regardless of disability, is intellectually capable and has the skills and motivation to manifest just as anyone in daily life. Um, they want to be fully included, to be accepted and appreciated, to learn and to be heard. So, presuming competence means that educators and service providers must take responsibility to listen, to be creative, to be innovative, and at very least to try and find ways for individuals to participate. So, that goes a lot along with speech. So, finding a way to access it is sometimes the hardest. And like I was saying at the beginning, OT and speech have to work a lot together sometimes to figure out the best access method or the best access spot uh, to be able to figure out how they get to what they need. But you have to assume that that child knows exactly what they want to say. It's just getting it to where we want it to be. Um, so I'm going to go back to this one. So if they have a CVI, they cannot use eye gaze. I do hear that a lot. CVI is a cortical visual impairment for anybody who doesn't know. All CVIs are different. The only time I will tell you that if your child has a CVI, that their retinas are detached, they would not be able to use an eye gaze. And I know sometimes that happens with some brain injuries, but eye gaze basically is a reflection off your retinas. So if your retinas are not detached, if your retinas are detached, you wouldn't be able to do it. Everything else, you can do high contrast symbols, we can do larger pictures. There's a lot of things that we do to change things to be able to visually be able to see it better. I did a kid today that he has strabismus in one eye. So we just did the other eye. He only scans with one eye versus the other. So there's a lot of things you can look at. They need full head control and eye control to use eye gaze. This is one of those kind of yes, kind of no. Full head control, that's not practical to ask of anybody. So sometimes it's just finding the best position, whether it's leaning them back in a chair, in their wheelchair, or flat in their bed and then putting the device over them so they can access it functionally. And for the eye control for the use of eye gaze, that's really one that OT does play a role in for tracking and being able, attention wise, being able to hold their attention. But there's a lot of different things you can do to set so be able to make it easier for them to access it, and then also building some of those muscles up. But I would always try it because you really have no idea what the ability is at. Um, so those are basically those. So there's a couple resources and Pathways and My Toby Dynavox are both places that if you wanted to kind of explore the beginnings of it without really not being sure where you want to go. Pathways is basically for parents and therapists to be able to know where to start. It gives you good ways to model and how to make a good communication environment and how to kind of make those myths not be true and all of that stuff. My Toby Dynavox has a lot of resources for how to make communication boards, print off communication boards, all of those things, as well as all speech pathologists. So if you're already working with one who isn't using AAC with your child, they're able to download a lot of our software for free to trial. So that's a good way. And um, you can create a profile to be able to share the things and save documents as well as printouts. So you can register and explore and then ask me, which is on the My Toby Dynavox. And then the Learning Hub is new as well, and they're all about an hour-long classes. So if you kind of end today and you're like, I want to know more, but I'm not really sure about asking Christian or whoever my rep is, wherever y'all are located, learn.tobydynavox.com. You can look at like a journey into IEs or an introduction to pathways or how to do the board maker and be able to figure out more pictures and how to get it to be more educational for your child. There's one great one on scanning, and it kind of gives you a good overview of what you're looking to do with your child and where to go. There's also, I believe, one on like how to get started in AAC. So that's a really good resource as well. And a lot of times once y'all take a Toby Dynavox Learning Hub course, we kind of see, and a lot of times we're able to reach out and help you a little bit more. These are just some of my resources that I used. ASHA, which is the American Speech and Hearing Association, has a lot of great resources on speech, AAC, and pediatric TBIs, how they all go hand in hand and what some of the effects are with all of it together. So that's a really great place. I can send these resources out as well. And there's a couple great articles, research articles. And that's all I have for my presentation. I don't like to bore y'all with my PowerPoints for too long because I know I don't pay attention to PowerPoints for very long. So I do know y'all had sent some questions before. So let me bring up the ones Rhonda had sent me. And then y'all can also unmute and or put things in the chat if there's more questions. So I did get the one with, will using a device deter my child from speaking verbally, and can it help with intelligibility and articulation of verbal speech? So I kind of addressed that one. For the intelligibility and articulation of verbal speech, there's a lot of research that shows, for instance, with apraxia, which is a lot of times what that diagnosis might be, depending on what the injury is and all that, it supports it, and it gives a correct model for them daily and for each word to be able to have a more clear and intelligible speech every day. And then, so those were those two. Let me go to the next ones. how to develop and encourage eye control and tracking. So the best would be to, I kind of were chatting with some of the other reps, and we kind of said, look into an OT for eye gaze. Some are really trained in this, and it's an active part of life in every changing bit of it, and it's changing over time. So it's teaching the brain to learn how to adapt the eyes, and it does adapt over time, but OT is really my recommendation for that one. My next question I have on here is how to make and use a choice board. So choice boards are, you can make a ton of them, but I would go to the My Toby Dynavox, and all the core first boards are able to be printed out. And you can also do the board maker online, and they're free, and they go along actually with the single core words. So I would do that, and then have a speech therapist help with implementation and be able to teach him a little bit more about it. So that's my answer on that one. If a leg kick is my son's best response, how to use it for higher level communication. This one, I would say switch access, but considering control and placement, being able to use switch cause and effect games. There's a couple different sites. There's Tar Heel Readers, and there's Help Kids Learn. And you can actually plug a switch in, different switches. So there's actually one that's like a wobble switch, and he can kick it. And if he has the control, depending on how big the movement is, to see if we can control that cause and effect with his kick and see where it goes. That's definitely one. Whoever that one is from, I would love to talk to you more and see what speech has done and where you could go with that, because I think you could do a lot. It's just like honing in that skill and seeing if that's the most functional. So feeding therapy. I am not a feeding specialist. I will tell you that right now. I do have a couple people I know that are really good in feeding specialists. They're feeding specialist certified, and they're speech pathologists as well. And so I would be more than happy to share their information, because that goes along with the oral exercises to encourage eating and speech. So I would love to share that information. If anybody would like that information, I can definitely pass it along, depending sorry, I'm reading the chat at the same time. So I would love to be able to pass that along, because I think that's important. I just don't know what area that person lives in. So if you're in the Austin area, I can help you. If you're in the Temple area, I can help you. Beyond that, I can ask around for sure, because we all have different territories, and I know of people all over the state. So the next one is how to demo communication devices. Okay, so there's feeding questions from OKC. Okay, let me get Rhonda, can you pass along? I think my email is in the email Rhonda maybe sent out earlier. And if you will email me if you have a feeding question or a specific question based on where you live, send it to me, and I can help with more direction on that.
Okay, how about when I share the PowerPoint, I will share your email.
Perfect.
We have a feeding specialist, as I mentioned to you, 2 feeding specialists talking on July 9th.
Yes.
Support group from Napa Center. So that's coming.
They will have more resources as well. Okay, so demo communication devices, if possible, how to demo. So for this one, I would do your research and figure out maybe what company you choose to go with. Know that certain companies are better at eye gaze or better at head mouse, and like knowing those things, and ask questions. Email me, ask a question, and be like, hey, this is my situation. Can you give me some pointers on where to go? And then your local rep, depending on where you're at, we absolutely will come set up a time with you. I know COVID's a little weird right now. I'm doing some remote sessions and some in person. I did a couple in person evals today, and you just do like a demo eval, see like can the kid use it? What's the best access method? Kind of explore your options. And then a lot of insurances require a trial for 30 days. And if they don't require a trial, a lot of areas have loan pools that you can kind of rent one out for 6 weeks. Your speech pathologist can, and you can trial it during those 6 weeks to help. And a lot of times, like your rep, wherever you're located, will absolutely help you set it up and figure out the best way for your kid to use it. Because I know it's difficult. And also, with that being said, if you trial it maybe 6 months post TBI and it's not working right now because we're not quite ready for it, try it again. I've seen that a few times. Absolutely. Give it a little while, give it some time to then try it in 6 months later down the road or a year later. So that's always a good idea. There's a question about a 13-year-old son who's understanding but completely locked in. This one was Rye Guy. He sounds really cute, and I kind of want to know more. I want to know where y'all are located because I have some great therapists. Because I think when you go to grad school for speech, they do not teach you everything you need to know about AAC. It's usually like maybe a semester course, and it's hard. Like I do it every day, and I still see things every day that I'm like, wow, this is new. Let's brainstorm multiple brains on it because you don't know. Every kid is so different. Every adult is so different. And so for this one, I have some great ideas for him, but also I would love to know maybe where. Okay, so you're in Oklahoma. We do have a rep up there. I don't know any therapists up there, but let me kind of email me once you get my email, and I would love to maybe connect with you to be able to get you with the rep, but also brainstorm and see what might be best and see how he might be able to use it because there's always some way. You just got to figure out the best way. So those are really my questions. I mean, my answers to those questions. And then they all go hand in hand with some aided language stimulation of uh, you're welcome, Julie. I was just reading it. So just saying it, showing it, and using it, like it's as much as you can get it in front of them. If you already have one at home and you're like, it's not working well, or this or that, the more you model it, the more they hear it, the more they see it, the more that you use it, the better chance they have of understanding and using it on their own. It should always be available. It's just learning. So it's a process. It's definitely a journey. It's not easy, but I've seen it time and time again. Like I said, beginning, I do a lot at Texas Neuro here, and it's possible. So it's just figuring out the best way. Those are the questions I have. Does anybody else have more questions? Y'all are more than welcome to. I'm reading. No. Okay. Rhonda, did anyone have any other questions for you that you got sent or anything? I made it quick tonight, y'all.
No, I haven't seen any.
Okay. When I get nervous, I talk fast, and this is not my normal. Presenting is not my favorite thing.
No, you did great. So we'll give them just a few more minutes to type in a question, and then I guess if you think you've said all that you want to say, we will end it now. As soon as we maybe just two or three more minutes, just in case they're typing something along.
Yes, please ask away. I know I just threw a lot of information at y'all too.
Well, they're probably looking forward to seeing the PowerPoint again, and getting to have your information. Maybe they want to email you.
Yes. And like I said before, I'm obviously the Austin rep, but there's a lot of us like throughout the country. So depending on where y'all are at, just let me know if you want to know the reps information from where you're at. please send me your zip code because I can look up your rep based on your zip code. And so that will help me better find your who I need to get you in touch with.
Perfect. Okay, let's see.
So insurance. So private insurances, typically, yes. Um, there's always exclusions on the random plans that you're like, really? Um, They usually cover about 80%, but if you've met your deductible for the year, a lot of people wait till like December and then your copay isn't really anything. If you have dual insurance, so I have a lot of kids that have private and then Medicaid as a secondary, they do cover it for the most part. I know here in Texas, if you have Medicaid as a secondary, that they do require your 30-day trial. Also, here in Texas, we have a state telephone access program. So basically, they allow everyone access to a telephone that would naturally be able to talk on the telephone, but they aren't able to naturally do it at this point. So they are able to communicate through their device on the telephone. Therefore, the program covers a communication device for your child. All roads of purchasing one, other than buying it out of pocket, always require a speech pathologist to be on board, whatever form it is to fill out, whether it's insurance, whether it's STAP, whether it's some of the other things. It's always a speech pathologist is required. So that's kind of how it goes. The one that is the hardest for my son is due already. I didn't see. Hold on, let me read that question. I will. I'm gonna take a picture of that piece real quick, but I don't think it's ever too young. I actually did a 2-year-old the other day, um, who is one had a TBI, and I had another 2.5-year-old who has a rare syndrome. Um, Trying it. Sometimes I did do one, and he just wasn't ready for it yet, and we tried it a little while later, and he was at that point learning those cause and effect. CVI, it's like I said, I think as long as his retinas are attached, and that's a question you do have to usually ask the ophthalmologist. But I think definitely reaching out and talking to your rep, and then possibly getting in touch with an SLP. Sometimes if you talk to the rep in your area, we usually get to know the SLPs that are really comfortable with devices. And so sometimes we can suggest a good SLP who really knows what they're doing with either eye gaze device or switch scanning or whatever access you might think your kid is needing. Talk to your rep. So, Stephanie, I will look up that area code and I will see who your rep is in North Carolina. Um, Hold on. Let me go back to Boardmaker. Boardmaker is not free. Your district, depending on where you are, can have it. There's Boardmaker free resources. So on goboardmaker.com, the first 12 books for the core words are printable and they are free. You have to like add them to your basket, but it's $0. And so you can print off a lot of their free resources. The entire board maker is not free. You can get a personal subscription, which I think is like $100 for a year, and you can have it on your own child's device so they can access it with eye gaze, touch, switch, whatever their access method is, they're able to do it. Um, so, okay, so Stephanie, the second part, our SOP left. So he wasn't progressing with feeding, so they left. Did she ever try AAC? That's what I want to know. A lot of times a therapist is sometimes so trained in feeding and doesn't know enough about AAC, but a lot of them are finally realizing a lot of your feeding kids are your AAC kids because it really goes hand in hand. A lot of your kids that have those oral motor issues that they struggle with eating are the same oral motor issues with the speech. And so it goes, like I said, hand in hand. So I think really finding a therapist that knows both. And so maybe finding a therapist that would be better suited to be able to do feeding and or AAC, or if you're choosing to take a break with feeding, to go to an AAC therapist. So let me see that zip code. I took a picture of it so I know how to look it up, and I will send that. And then Rhonda, yes. So Texas Technology Access Program here in Austin, they are out by the Domain. They're at the Pickle Research Center, and they can loan out devices to trial. They can only loan them out to a speech pathologist. They will not typically loan them out to a parent. Um, so they will loan it out for 6 weeks, and so your speech pathologist can request it. They send it to them for 6 weeks, and that you can trial it. So a lot of times that's a good way to get good data, because they are able to give you the data. For a speech pathologist to write your report, you need enough data to be able to justify it on your license. So a lot of times they're a little weary of just writing a report, and that's understandable, but that gives you a good way to be able to really have the data you need to be able to do that. Rhonda, are they for everyone in Texas? I believe it is for everyone. I know it's at least for all of Central Texas. There might be other places in Texas that have it. I do believe Houston does have one as well, and so does Dallas. They have loan programs, but I'm not positive. So just let me know on areas and I can always find out. Like I said, always feel free to email me and just ask a question, and I can kind of help with some information if there's more questions there. So hopefully that answered everyone's questions. Stephanie, when Rhonda sends out this, definitely email me, and I will look up that zip code for you to be able to get more information to you. So I think that covers everything.
Well, thank you so much. You have been awesome. We appreciate it. If you can send that to me, and then I'll get this recording hopefully by tomorrow or the next day, and I'll send everything out to everyone.
Okay.
All right.
Awesome.
Thank you. Hope everyone has a great evening.
Bye, y'all.